Welcome to Meet the Prof. Hey, this is Shane here, and I'm so glad you have joined us. This is a podcast where we seek to encourage Christ-centered conversations on the college campus. I really appreciate you taking this time out to listen or watch if you're on YouTube. And we have a treat this time of hearing from Derek Cruz. Derek is a professor of management at the Texas Women's University. And I think you'll really enjoy hearing his personal background and how it has really informed his career and his care for students. Before we jump in, if you would please remember to click on subscribe. It doesn't cost anything, or follow or like, whatever ways you can give input. Let's dive in. Here is my interview with Derek Cruz. Well, Derek, welcome to Meet the Prof. It is really fun to have you on the podcast now. Thanks for taking this time. I'm very curious. So you teach at the Texas Women's University. The first question, it may be a no-brainer, sound like a stupid question, but do you all have any men as students?
That is actually a very common question, and the answer is yes, we are co-ed. We have been officially co-ed since 1994. The university was founded in 1903, I believe, and we were 100% women until 1994. Right now, we are at the undergraduate level about 90% female, 10% male. But then there's certain programs, for example, the MBA program in the College of Business and Entrepreneurship that I teach in is 30% men and 70% women.
So I'm so surprised to hear that. I thought if there was an exception, you might say there's one or two men around there. I didn't know the school was co-ed.
Well, we are, and our mission is still primarily the education of women. But we have some programs that are really just such a good value. We have men come and enroll, particularly in business and then some of the health sciences. So it's not unusual at the undergraduate level when I have a class on campus, I might have 29 women and one guy in the class or something like that. But then at the graduate level, it's usually more like a third.
What's it like for you as a professor to teach mostly women?
Well, it took some adjusting, I guess. I had been in higher education for a little over 15 years when I came here, and I taught at a Baptist college in West Virginia for 7 years, and then I was at a state college in Florida and a community college in Arkansas as administrator. And then I came here for two reasons. One, I was looking at that point in my life, my wife and I were wanting to get back and settled in North Texas, which is where her family was. So I was looking to get back here. And also I was looking to get back into a faculty role because I just felt like that my passion for higher education was more in the education side of things and more student contact than I was having in administration. And this opportunity just opened up. I certainly never thought I would, in my wildest dreams, that my career focus would end up being at a women's university. Just never even crossed my mind. But, it has been such an honor to be able to interact with these young women on our campus. And it's very unique and I've been at 4 different universities as faculty and staff, 3 universities myself as a student. And this place is a little bit unique in that our students come here to study. There's a lot of reasons that students go to various colleges or universities. They come to TWU to study and maybe for athletics or extracurricular activities. But even if that's the case, their number one priority is their classes. Our average GPA for our student athletes is around 3.6, just to give you an example. They're
Nice.
Really focused students. So it's been an honor really to be able to help prepare them specifically for careers in HR, and then to watch them go out and be successful in their careers and to stay in touch with them and watch them on LinkedIn and see all the things that they're into.
That has to be motivating for you as a professor to see the students motivated.
It is. And, it's not something that I've ever thought about or pursued. This is just where God placed me. And it's sometimes I just know from conversations with students, I can see that sometimes my ministry here is to fill a gap for a young woman, or even in some cases, sometimes a young man's life, but the majority of our students are women. But to fill a gap in terms of what they never had in their life as far as a positive male and the influence of perhaps a father or an uncle, or particularly one coming from a Christian perspective.
Well, how common is that to see some gap there? And do you have any examples, without sharing names, of a time you were really able to really fill in a missing father role in some way?
Well, one student comes to mind that really was struggling with some academic challenges, trying to get through school. I never really understood until graduation, until commencement day, exactly what all was going on in her life. And when it finally clicked for me in terms of why she would come to me for counsel and advice, is because after commencement, we have a gathering out on a huge quadrangular lawn, and students can introduce faculty and other students as well, and maybe their academic advisor to their families, and there's photo ops. We have a photo backdrop together. And this student sought me out and wanted to introduce me to her family, and then we all took a photo together. Every single one was a female. Her mother, 2 aunts, a cousin, I can't remember who else, but there was not a single man in that photo. And, that kind of thing, it kind of clicked that in this role as a professor, you're teaching, primarily from the perspective of the job description is to teach and research and write. But more importantly, it's to minister to other people. And more importantly, we are serving Jesus Christ in our role as a professor, and he brings people into our life that we can minister to, whether that's encouragement, whether it's sharing Christ, whether it's building up, whether it's just listening, whether it's pointing them in the right direction for resources that they might need to be successful, either in academics or maybe it's something else. Sometimes it's mental health. And we have a lot of resources. We're a large university, a state university with 16,000 students. So we have a lot of resources that we can point our students towards. We even have a kind of a pantry, a grocery pantry on campus. And students can just go get whatever they need. They don't have to show any
for the students.
Financial need or anything like that. It's kind of like a little grocery store. They can, if they need something, they can walk in and get it.
What kind of food is in the pantry?
All kinds. Yeah. And then
is there a frozen section, and is there refrigerated, or is it all dry food?
Most of us dry food, but we do have a kind of a fresh fruit produce, usually about 3 times during the semester that we have distribution in parking lots. And we partner with the Tarrant County Food Bank to do that. So they bring over a truckload of food, and we unload it in the parking lot. And we have faculty, staff, and students volunteering to do the distribution. And
what a great idea.
Anybody that wants to get in line, it doesn't matter if they're a student or not. That could be staff. We have a lot of staff, actually, that take advantage of it, which was kind of surprising to me the first time that I went through it. But it just kind of reinforces some of the challenges that many people are having, just being able to maintain the basic necessities of life right now.
Sure.
I've had students that I've met that it's been rare, but I've had a few students I have found that were living in their cars. So
really
homeless, and an opportunity to be able to try to just help them get back on their feet. And just sometimes it's simply letting them know that somebody cares about you. I hear you. I love you. I'm going to get you some help. Here's where you can go. And sometimes they just don't know where to go or what to do.
You are not just meeting people's academic needs, then you are really helping these students, and the whole campus is being helpful. It's interesting. Your career has you both as faculty members and administrator. What for you specifically as a professor was a moment that you were embarrassed?
Well, there's been probably quite a few of those, but one that stands out probably is I teach, part of my classes is in a graduate MBA program. And pre-COVID, that program was hybrid, where we would teach a 7-week class. We'd have 3 full Saturdays every other Saturday over 7 weeks. So half online, half on site on Saturdays. So these were 7-hour classes. And some of the classes I would teach at our Houston campus. So I would fly down on Friday afternoon and then spend the night. There's a hotel right across the street from the campus. Walk over to the campus on Saturday, teach a 7-hour MBA class, and then fly home that night. So it was an exhausting weekend. But I got into the hotel and opened up my suitcase, and my notebook with all my lecture notes and class materials for the 7-hour MBA class the next day was not there. So I called my wife, and sure enough, it was sitting on my desk at home. So I thought,
It is.
okay, this will be a first. I get to wing it for a 7-hour class.
What did you do?
Then I knew the content a lot better than I thought, I guess, because the students never knew that I didn't have.
They never do. They're finding out right now.
Yeah, yeah, no, right, exactly. And I was, thoughts going through my mind: is there any way my wife can ship that and get it to me by
That's the first thing I was thinking. Like, how
tomorrow morning?
quickly could it be
But it
shipped?
wasn't.
Oh, that's great. That'd be hard enough for just a 1 hour class, but a 7 hour class, and I have the notes and all.
Yeah, so that one kind of stands out, but it worked out okay. I
Hmm.
don't want to do it again.
Well, on a more serious note, on meettheprof.com, you shared pretty transparently about trauma in your life when your father passed away. I was wondering if you could tell us more about what you learned about doubt and trust and faith through all of that.
Right. Well, I mentioned in my Meet the Prof profile that I grew up in a Christian home, Christian parents. We were in church every week on a regular basis. We had a regular Bible time at home where our dad would. I had 6 siblings. Several have passed away, but there were 7 of us, and Dad would get us all 7 together and read the Bible on a regular basis. And I remember that from when I was 3 and 4 years old. I have a nice black and white photo. I guess my mom took. Had to be her because she's the only one not in the picture, and it's Dad reading the Bible to all the kids. And what I wrote about in my profile is that I grew up in a Christian home. So I grew up believing in God, believing in Jesus Christ. I grew up understanding that Jesus died on the cross for our sins. In order to be saved, we need to repent. We need to ask him into our heart. We need a personal relationship with him. So these were all things that just were part of our growing up. And at the age of 5, and this was, of course, at the age of 5, you're hearing these things. You don't really fully process all that.
Sure.
I had not prayed a prayer to ask Jesus to be my Lord and Savior yet. I had not really put my trust in him. But at the age of 5, Dad died of a heart attack, and I was 5. He was 43, and that was his 3rd heart attack. So he had some pretty serious heart issues, and this was mid-1960s, so there just wasn't the same kind of medical care for heart problems as there is today. And our mom suddenly is raising 7 kids on her own. We were living in Washington, D.C. at the time, and my dad was a school teacher there, as well as the super for our apartment building because he couldn't raise 7 kids on a school teacher's salary.
Hmm.
And when he passed away, Mom tried to make it there for I don't know exactly how many months, but I know it wasn't very long before she moved us back to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where her and my dad were both originally from. So she needed the help of extended family. But for the next couple of years, through welfare and free lunches and help from family, that's how we survived. But then 2 years later, she remarried a man, Bobby Carroll, who was on staff at the church that we attended. He was the minister of music and the youth pastor at that time. He ended up retiring from that church 30 some years later. But where my mom really got to know him was my grandmother Cruz, my dad's mom, had turned her home into a boarding house, and Bobby was one of the boarders. So yeah, we spent quite a bit of time at Grandma Cruz's house after Dad died, and that's ended up with a loving relationship between my mom and Bobby. And don't know what he was thinking, but he married a woman with 7 children. And he was a bachelor, and he grew up as an only child. At 36 years old, he took on a woman with 7 kids, ranging from 5 to 17, I guess, at that time. And as I got older, I appreciated that much more. Especially, there's a verse in my Bible that I have written his name beside. I wrote out Bobby. And that verse is Psalm 68, 5 and 6. A father of the fatherless and a defender of the widows is God in his holy habitation. God sets the solitary in families. And that perfectly describes what he did. He took a solitary man, a bachelor, a 36-year-old bachelor, and put him into a position of being married suddenly with 7 kids. And really, who does that? God had a plan, and you can't elaborate very much in a short profile on Meet the Prof, but I've seen that over and over again in my life where circumstances may come up that cause you to doubt, and you might feel a little bit lost. Why in the world is this happening? Where do I go now? Where do I turn? But God always has a plan, and just continue to trust in him. Don't get in a hurry. I heard, or I read, I guess, J.I. Packer once explain it this way, and that is, as you go through life, enjoy the pleasures of life and manage the pains, because you're going to have a little bit of both. And consistently, every single time, I've seen that God always has a plan.
Well, thanks for sharing that. When would you say was a time of special growth for you spiritually after you, as you grew up with that foundation of the Christian faith already?
Well, I think it probably was when I was well into my 20s, maybe late 20s. And this doesn't show up in my profile because I've been a professor for over 30 years now. But prior to that, I worked for 12 years in accounting and finance in the trucking industry. It was in my late 20s. I was working in accounting and finance, and our church asked if I would teach the college and career Sunday school class. And through the process of Bible study each week, preparing for that, it kind of goes back to the way I grew up. So even after Mom married Bobby, we grew up in Calvary Baptist Church, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, had some wonderful, excellent Bible teaching and mentors. Dr. Mark Horst was our pastor there. I can still hear him expositing verse by verse through the Bible. Dr. Gary Chapman just recently retired from there, of the 5 Love Languages fame. And
I'm familiar with
Gary
him.
he was my counselor at junior camp. He was my teacher in college and career. So I had a lot of good influences. And part of that influence was emphasizing the need for a daily quiet time. So that was a habit from a very early age. It still is a habit. But when I really started to, I think, experience more spiritual growth is when I started teaching the Bible. And one of the classes that I teach is training and development, undergraduate and graduate course. And all of my students have to prepare a training module. They get to choose the topic, but they have to present a 30-minute training module to the class that they have designed. So they do a little bit of instructional design, and then they teach it. And I tell them, you're going to learn this topic. You may think you know it now, but you're going to learn it much, much better when you have to teach it to someone else. And that's when my real spiritual growth began, is when I started teaching the Bible to others. And then I started realizing how little I really know about the Bible. And even today, I'm reading the Bible and reading commentaries and realizing how little I still know.
Me too. There's something about teaching, then we get a lot more out of it than the students sometimes.
Absolutely.
You're saying?
Right. Yep.
Wow, that's great. Well, so when you entered grad school, was your faith much of a source of tension with the environment you were in as you were getting your PhD? What was your relationship with Jesus like through that time?
Well, I would say it grew stronger because there were times with a particular professor or some of the assigned readings that challenged my faith in a way. Certainly some of the teaching and some of the readings were anti-biblical, anti-Christian, coming from a very different worldview. Many, many times I've seen students, in the worst case scenario, they just turn their back on their faith. But in many cases, it's more that they just become kind of apathetic. Well, I don't really know what I believe. And they kind of go on that way for many, many years, or sometimes forever. In my case, what it did was it forced me to go back and really dig deeper to understand the worldview that I had been raised in. Is it really true? And instead of believe, and gradually what happened over the years between that and also between teaching the Bible myself and then being involved in things like short-term missions and being able to preach the word from time to time in various settings. All of that combined got me to the point where I really know what the reason that I believe what I believe. And it's not because I was raised that way. It's because it is truth.
You were tested and you came out stronger than in your faith, you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. But it often doesn't go that way.
Yeah. Well, so you have a unique perspective. You see the students making career decisions. You've been 30 some years in your career. So some faculty and students as well may think that the careers that glorify God the most are those of being a pastor, being a missionary. But how would you challenge that? How can you glorify God in your career as a faculty member?
Well, I guess one way to answer that is with Scripture. And that takes me to Colossians 3:23. Whatever you do, work heartily as to the Lord and not to men. But then when you go to verse 24, Paul says, you are serving Christ the Lord. So whatever you do, it doesn't matter what. And I used to think growing up, and part of this is just the way contemporary church works, at least in my upbringing. And that is, you'd have an altar call at the end of the service, and people would be encouraged to come down and profess faith. But also, many times people would be encouraged maybe to rededicate their life to Christ or to dedicate their lives to full-time Christian service. So for many years, I thought that in order to be in ministry, that's what you did. You went and committed your life to full-time Christian service. But eventually I began to realize that, and it was many, many years later that I fully grasped this, I think, and that is that if you're a Christian, you're expected to be ministering to others, no matter what you're doing, whether you're a professor, whether you are a custodian, whether you're in law enforcement, firefighter, scientist, homemaker, no matter what you are doing, you have a ministry. And Paul talks about this also in 2 Corinthians 10, I believe. Paul talked about his area of influence that God had assigned to him. And that's a question that I pose when I'm teaching particularly young people. What is your area of influence that God has assigned to you? Because there is one, right? Or at least there will be one. That's why we're here. We're here to serve Christ in our area of influence. And all of us are really in ministry. We just have different mission fields.
That's so motivating, just hearing you describe it that way. And it gets my focus off myself of, my career should be about me, making me feel successful and fulfilled. You're given a vision of this is about serving Christ, serving others, helping others.
And all of us need reminding of that, because we all get busy and we all find ourselves wrapped up in all the to-dos. And sometimes we need to come back to the fact of, oh, wait a minute, how am I serving the Lord? That's what I'm supposed to be doing here, right? That's the focus.
Yeah. There's never a perfect time to pause an interview. So I really hope you will stay tuned and wait for next week for part 2 of my interview with Derek Cruz. And I think you'll especially be encouraged by how he continues to work out his faith on campus in his work with students. So thank you for tuning in and listening to this part 1 with Derek. And if you'll please remember to like or subscribe wherever you are listening or watching. And my encouragement, like my question for this week for you is, who is a professor that you think would be helped by this interview with Derek? And if you can think of someone and send them a link to this interview, we are really hoping that these interviews will be helpful and supportive to faculty out there. So thanks for being a part of this with us. And until next time, I hope this encourages you to have a Christ-centered conversation on your college campus.